the fact that he made more news than Bruno Mars.
Sex is pleasurable.
Obviously, that comes as no surprise.
Is practically absent in the civil service.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Headlines, the go-to space for the top stories that made the headlines and more. My name is Amalina, Kamal.
And I'm Hazween, Hassan. Today we're continuing our discussion on the controversies surrounding Global Ikhwan Service and business holdings. Since last week, the company has faced a lot of heat, unraveling a web of complex and damning accusations. This particularly after police carried out its operation codenamed Ops Global that led to the arrest of 171 people. From this, 402 children aged between 1 and 17 were rescued from 20 welfare homes in Selangor and Negeri Sembilan. Screenings then revealed that some of them were likely victims of exploitation, neglect and abuse.
That's right, Hazween. And the latest from the police, at least as of today, 19th of September, as reported by our crime reporter Austin Cameron's, GISB Executive Chairman and CEO Nasiruddin Muhammad Ali has been arrested. Now, the Inspector General of Police, Tan Sri Razaruddin Hussein, confirmed that the 65-year-old was among 19 individuals detained in a raid at Jalan Imbi complex early this morning. Now, the operation led by Bukit Aman's Criminal Investigation Department involved D11, the unit which is the Special Operations, the D14, Organised Crime Unit, and a Special Integrated Investigation Team at around 5:40 a.m.
Now, Amalina, in a separate development, 3 GISB employees were charged in the Seremban Sessions Court on Thursday with 14 counts of child sexual assault. The men, all staff of a religious school in Kuala Lumpur, pleaded not guilty. They face charges under the Sexual Offences Against Children Act 2017. Bail was set at 12,000 ringgit for each charge, with the next hearing set for October 30th.
Right. Now, to sort of like deepen the discussion further, I want to backtrack a little bit in terms of, what triggered the crackdown. As you mentioned, Hazween, around 402 children were rescued due to allegations of exploitation and abuse. And some of these allegations are pretty serious because it involves sodomy and even reports of children being taught to sodomize other children.
Yep. These are very serious charges, Amalina. GISB, however, on the same day as the raids on September 11th, they've denied any involvement in the case, saying that none of the homes raided were under their management. They even threatened to sue those who defamed them. Now, just 3 days later, however, its CEO, Nasiruddin Muhammad Ali, came out in a video saying that only 1 or 2 cases of sodomy had actually occurred in its welfare homes. And he stressed that it only involved several people. Now, GISB's presence at key events is being scrutinized. Obviously, that comes as no surprise. And they were actually, Amalina, removed from MIHAS 2024, weren't they?
Yeah, that's correct, Hazween. And MIHAS, for those of you who don't know, is the Malaysia International Halal Showcase. Now, GISB was originally slated to participate in MIHAS, the largest halal showcase, that is, but their booth was left empty when the event opened. Now, it's unclear whether GISB, dropped out themselves or they were told to be removed from the event. But what's certain is that GISB is a significant player, with assets of around 325 million here, if I'm not mistaken, and businesses across 20 countries. And some of these businesses, spread in, areas such as that people can actually say it's very high profile. Among them, Saudi Arabia, and they have restaurants in London as well as Paris.
That's quite right. I mean, they're quite established in the halal Muslim scene here, in the halal Muslim industry. And see, beyond the company's business dealings, it seems there's also been more legal development. So just recently, a GISB member was charged in court for threatening a woman to withdraw her police report against the company. 39-year-old Riza Makar, a businessman with GISB, pleaded not guilty, however, to the charge and was granted bail. He's said to have threatened a 25-year-old woman at a parking lot in Putrajaya just earlier this month on September 9th.
Well, Riza also, appealed to the court, noting that his wife recently just gave birth less than about a month ago, and this is part of why he wanted bail. And considering it's a school holiday, he wants to be with his family. Well, he has up to 7 children. Now, this was stated in court, obviously, by Riza, and the court actually granted bail for 10,000 ringgit with one surety. I'm not too sure how this development, especially with this criminal intent charge, is going to take place, but we have up until October 18 for the mention to I suppose, wait for, right? The case is unfolding, but like you said, the court made it clear.
The court's made it clear. He's made his appeal, as one would likely would.
Yeah.
And we'll just have to see how it goes on from here on out. Yep.
Right, yeah. No, I just want to go back to the 402 children that were rescued aged between 1 to 17. Now, the Women's as well as Family and Community Development Minister, Datuk Sri Nancy Shukri, did assure the public that the children are under good care, and the ministry is working very closely with the police in helping the investigation and, you know, making sure that the children are properly cared for despite the basically traumatic events that they had to endure, right? And with that, we do have an interview with clinical psychologist Urmilah Dass to talk about the complexities and trauma among children having to endure such a situation.
As a clinical psychologist, how do you detect trauma, and how do they manifest in children who have experienced abuse, especially in an environment where they think it's safe but it's not?
Okay. Hi, Amalina. To answer your first question, how do I detect it? Normally, I mean, I'm going to give you answers where I have personally gone through it through experience. When I see a client, whether, because in this case, we're talking about children from the age of 1 to 17, just before they reach adulthood at 18. So a lot of developmental stages have gone through already, and is supposed to be complete by the age of 18, right? So each child manages trauma differently according to their personality and their temperament, right? So you might have two children from an abuse background and both of them acting differently. So how do I detect it? Okay, normally they come in with anxiety or complaints of them acting out or playing truant in school and etc. And over time, building rapport and trust with the client or the children, it helps make them understand that, I have only their best interests at heart and they are okay to tell me what happened. And because, the nature of the abuse is more sexual, it is sometimes seen as shameful to say these things to a third person. So it takes a long time. In my experience, I've seen clients for 5-6 sessions and they've never spoken about it and they denied anything, any kind of abuse, physical, emotional, and even sexual. But over time, they are showing symptoms. Like, for example, I actually look out for marks on, people's hands, their fingernails, any scratch marks, their neck, etc. And I've seen some telltale signs of maybe a bruise on the neck or some scratches on the wrist. And I start with that, how did you get that? And is it okay to talk about it? And after some time, they will actually share with a lot of tears and sadness and shame. So how do I detect it? So some of them come in with anxiety and depression because they can't manage it. And others, their anxiety and depression is manifesting in anger, acting out, being aggressive. Yes.
All right. So hold on, yeah, because it's a bit loud here. Okay. All right. So in that situation, right, when a child or at least a teenager who has been exposed to abuse for a prolonged period of time, how does it affect their mental state? And then if it's not treated in the long term, what sort of detrimental effect that could, that we can see?
Okay. So, to come back to the main question of, how they are going to react to it and how does it affect them throughout their years, growth years. First of all, trauma is a deeply distressing and disturbing experience. And if they have been traumatized on a regular basis for long periods of time, they become more used to it, and it becomes like normalcy, especially when others around them are also behaving like it's a normal thing. But if it's a, like a one-off kind of event, uh, they will manifest the same kind of symptoms. It doesn't matter whether it happened once or it happened 10 times. But looking at research and looking at my own experience with people who have gone through sexual abuse, some of the things that they can't come to terms with or they grapple with is their own temperament. They will have mood shifts. Something can trigger them quite easily, like maybe a storyline that they're watching on, in a movie, or someone says something about trauma, like there's a case in the papers, and they start behaving differently. They might actually also go into substance to help them calm down. So, it's not only just trauma and getting through, making sense of why they were sexually abused or physically abused. It's also about dealing with all the habits they picked up over the years. So one of the things that happens most commonly is as they grow older and they have access to substance, drugs, alcohol, they will use that to calm themselves down. And the way it affects them would be their productivity with work, their relationships, their attachment styles with, future partners. They might not trust, or they might actually become more promiscuous than other people. And when it's really time for the act, they might back off, but they just recreate those, scenarios. And a lot of times, when I see couple counseling, um, intimacy sometimes is a problem. And when we get into a few sessions, I will learn that there has been sexual abuse in the past. Another way that I have seen sexual abuse manifest in the future is quite a number of them will start having OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, where they start cleaning. In their mind, they're dirty, right? When you're a child and you're being sexually abused, you really don't know what's happening and you think it's the norm. And then when you get to a certain age and you find out through education and media or friends that this is only supposed to happen, the act of sex is supposed to only happen with someone you love, they start feeling guilty because, sex is pleasurable. You will actually feel things that you can't feel before. And you have engaged in that act till maybe you reach puberty. If we are talking about pedophiles, once the child starts reaching puberty, they are not interested anymore. And then this child will realize that this is not normal and then will start feeling guilty that they enjoyed it, that it went on for so many years. And others can feel like, oh my God, that person has ditched me because I'm not good enough anymore. So, self-worth, self-esteem, sense of self, relationship, intimacy, temperament, everything changes. This is a game changer. I would say, in my personal opinion, this would be my hardest cases because it's going to take a long time to get over it, if at all.
Right. With that, understood. And with that, right, especially when it comes to self-worth and having to understand that, I mean, for those who had to endure sexual abuse from young up until they are, I suppose, legal, and then having to come to realize that actually the act that they were exposed to were not necessarily the right environment to be in, and having to realize that that was actually wrong. The healing process then, like, is it tougher for these individuals because and or is it like already a how do I say this, it's not able, you're not able to fully recover from that situation?
So I have seen clients who have recovered over time with a lot of work, and a lot of the work is done by the client, not the therapist. We can recommend and we can guide them and we can talk and we can clarify, but the work is done by the client. If the client is depressed, it's going to take longer. We need to treat the depression first and then go into the abuse and, make sense of it. And, over time, there are clients who recover. There are clients who never recover, I have to be honest. And then they have other issues like major depression. They can go into bipolar. That's another kind of depression. They can have anxiety. They can have, complex PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, that the slightest things will make them, have palpitations, and they are reminded about that abuse and that trauma that they went through. So basically, it comes back to the person's will and grit. If that person can say, okay, this was not meant to happen to me, I was a child, and understands what grooming means, and then understands that they had nothing to do with allowing this to happen because they are children, they were children, and that it is the fault of the abuser, then the chances of them recovering can be better, but not without a lot of problems. Like they'll have relationship issues. Sometimes marriages break. I know of people who need to drink a lot and subdue themselves to have, sexual relations with their own husband. And, even with sexual abuse happen to men as well, and the same for men. And, there are a lot of repercussions that happen, and other mental health disorders can manifest as well. And so I'm going to say that it's quite difficult, but again, we can rebrand ourselves, right? We can have they need to have faith that they can rebuild their lives, and that they are not this dirty, bad person that allowed it. That thought takes some time to get out of their mind.
Right. So as much as we want to highlight like how the surrounding or the support system is able to help a particular individual going through this traumatizing sort of event to rise above, it takes that own individual to realize this, right?
Yes.
Okay. But we still want to talk about creating a safe environment for children who are rescued. And in this particular situation, as what's already reported, under the police's OP global efforts, so 402 children were rescued. And what sort of first steps are usually being taken into consideration or being conducted when we rescue children from situations that are deemed destructive?
Okay. So in this case, there's been physical, sexual, psychological abuse endured by children over many years. They have been indoctrinated with thoughts that this is allowed, and they are allowed to abuse other children, right? So we're talking about something that has been systematically done over the years. So we are programmed, that child has been programmed to accept it and then to do it to another child. So when you rescue these children, some of them will be in denial that why are they being taken out from their comfort zone? Because, if you're there from year 1 till year 17 or year 10, you will think that this is the norm, right? So to undo that work, first of all, the child, when you take that child out from a situation like this, the person or the organization, first of all, need professionals to work with them. They need to be taken to safety where it's comfortable. And the way the officers speak to this child makes a big difference. So kindness, making the child feel safe, even if it's a 17-year-old, because I understand the oldest is 17, they need the same requirements, right? Send them to a clean place, give them food, keep them warm, keep them safe, and let them know that they are not going to be succumbing to any kind of punishment. So talking to them individually would be number one, after keeping them safe and comfortable. And what you talk about is, you cannot talk about the trauma immediately, because, research has been done in this, critical incident. Whenever there's something like this that happens, you cannot immediately talk to the victims about it. You need to give them time. They need to come out of whatever, headspace they were in. And you have to build rapport, just like most psychologists do with clients. You have to
Right.
build rapport.
Right, but in that, right? So, are there like effective therapies or treatments that usually you would inject to, or at least incorporate to get them to talk? I understand you have to basically treat them with dignity and then allow them to open up, right? But forms like the forms of therapies and treatments that are readily available, or you would recommend?
Okay, so first of all is supportive therapy, right? We listen. right? And then as time goes on and you notice that they are talking a bit more and they're coming up with negative thoughts like, I am dirty, I did this to myself, I shouldn't have done this, it's my fault, then you need to do a bit of cognitive behavior therapy where you challenge their automatic negative thought. But you have to watch if they're ready to accept it or not. If they are not, they don't have the insight that, you know, they also have a say in this and that they can make themselves feel better, CBT, cognitive behavior therapy, will not work. So supportive therapy, listening first. There's also trauma-based therapy where after you feel, you know, that the child or that individual, the teenager is comfortable with you, you will start teaching them relaxation techniques and, you know, how to go to a safe place in their mind and know that they are not in danger anymore. And then they start talking about the trauma. And that's when you use evidence-based trauma therapy. So they need to talk about it. And, you know, Amalina, this is going to take years. It's not 5 sessions, 10 sessions. It's not 1 year. It's going to take years. And
it needs to be
preferably,
consistent, I suppose, right?
yeah, consistent, and you need to be very understanding. And I think most times a psychiatrist needs to come in as well for medication because this is massive trauma, right? If you are new to a place and someone is sodomizing you every day, you're not going to be okay for a long time. You're going to need to recover medically. You need to, you know, make sure that the chemicals, neurotransmitters in the child's brain is working. And that's when child psychiatrists need to come in. And then the psychologists have to start their work. And it needs to be consistent with the same person. The child should not be seeing someone new every week. Nobody is going to get better in that way, right? So
So it's about
nationally,
building trust then, right?
yes. Yes, it's building trust. It's building a safe space. It's about telling the child that I'm not going to let you go now until you're okay. And they believe it. And then you need to undo all the, you know, blackmail, emotional blackmail, and, you know, whatever that was done to them. That this has got nothing to do with religion. And this has got nothing to do with them making a mistake. They are the victims. And I would rather call them survivors and build up their hope. Everybody needs hope, including children. The complications that sometimes can arise is that the older people, parents, can actually be quite negative towards these children. Some of them can be disowned, right? I worked with human traffic survivors in the government-run shelters, and these are some of the things that I've heard. It's not very far from this. They were also sold and raped and etc. And then parents have. So the parents also need counseling and sessions and even maybe medications, because any parent who did not know this was happening and had the best interest of their child would be devastated. They need help as well.
Right, right. But then it will be a different situation when the parents also think that this is actually okay. So the parents were also groomed into thinking that that was okay. So that's a whole different sort of area to for I suppose therapists or at least the government to look into, right? Okay,
Yes.
I still want to talk about trust here, right? Rebuilding trust, or at least having them to believe in the system again. Do you think that should be a priority, especially in the rehabilitation sort of process? What I want to ask is that how can we ensure that these children are not re-traumatized during the legal processes and stuff?
So, okay, since I'm believing that this is the first time such a case has blown up in our country to this level, you know, 402 children, 20 welfare homes, I think we don't have anything in place for this magnitude. But it's not too late. We can get everything together in a matter of 1 or 2 weeks. While the children are being, you know, looked after, safety, food, shelter, medical, everything is done. This other part needs to be done immediately, you know, like a emergency jawatan kuasa that comes up with a panel of professionals to talk about, okay, what can we do now, and fix it and do it.
Right. We do have the task force for that in terms of, but then not necessarily on children. I'm not too sure, but in terms of the ajaran sesat and deviant teachings, yes, definitely. So I suppose your suggestion would be a cross collaborative sort of agency effort, and probably if we don't have like a task force yet to sort of do that and attend to the situation immediately.
Yes. there is the scan, in the government hospitals when, like a minor is raped or abused, the scan team goes in, but it's more medical and police. I don't hear much about the counseling part or the psychotherapy part. And, I think that needs to be built right now. We have time, we have the resources, we have the people. We should have had it already running. But now that this thing has blown up in our faces, I think the government, all the necessary agencies should get together and come up with it within 24 hours, at least a framework, and start doing it. Because now, this time, after rescuing these children and teenagers, it's about keeping them safe, tending to them medically, because a lot of them were physically hurt as well, and then getting medications done, getting the proper diet, food, vitamins, everything. So we have some time while they are recovering to get this up and running, and then it becomes compulsory for all of them to get into therapy, right? There's no other way. Ajaran sesat and all that also comes in later. We're talking about religion here. It's a very sensitive issue, and I understand that people, when you're for 17 years, if you're taught something, you're not going to like unbelieve it, right? But why did this happen? What do we need to be doing to put in place so this never happens again? I mean, me personally, for many years I've been saying that psychological testing of people, even the public service, like people who are driving our buses and taxis, we don't know who has a criminal record, right? So all these people working in this 20 welfare homes, what is their background? Was there a background check done? So psychological testing must be done. And even the people who are going to work with these children now need to be professionals.
Basically, across all levels here lah.
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. We've gone through all our questions. Thank you so much, Urmila, for your insights. And I do hope there are at least some positives to this, especially in attending to these traumatized children. Thank you again.
Now, moving on to our second topic of interest, which revolves around the immigration department. Well, we know that the immigration department has recently announced, that they will be for the reforms aimed at improving not just their work processes but service delivery following a recent counter-setting scandal that was exposed at Kuala Lumpur International Airport recently. Now, this particular scandal involved immigration personnel that were implicated in facilitating the illegal entry of foreign nationals. As we know, we do have a newly appointed Immigration Department Director General, Datuk Zakaria Shaaban. He has taken the helm amid the fallout, replacing Datuk Ruslin Juso. Now, Zakaria, who was formerly the Deputy Secretary General at the Domestic Trade and Cost of Living Ministry, has pledged to fully cooperate with the MACC as well as other enforcement agencies to, be part of this comprehensive efforts to clean house, basically, and restore public trust.
That's right, Amalina. And his appointment comes at a critical time as the department faces intense scrutiny following the arrest of 49 immigration officers linked to the scandal. Zakaria says the department is committed to prioritizing national security and taking decisive action against personnel involved in corrupt practices. Now, earlier, Amalina, you spoke to Transparency International Malaysia President Dr. Muhammad Mohan. So let's see it then.
First of all, thank you for having me in your program. Okay, first of all, there were several recommendations made. If I'm not wrong, I think about 7 or 8 recommendations made by the MACC. Now, all these recommendations given by MACC should be taken very seriously by the Immigration Department, and they must take corrective action immediately. That is the first step they must do. All right. Now, once that is done, then they should get MACC to do an audit on these corrective actions taken to ensure that they are satisfied. MACC is satisfied that the recommendations made are complied. And if there are gaps, if MACC feels that the corrective actions taken are not satisfactory and there are still gaps, then the Immigration Department should fix them. All right. Now, internally, Immigration Department also, I believe they have integrity units or the Department of Integrity, and they should carry out internal audits themselves to ensure that all the corrective actions or the new standard operating procedures that have been put are complied with. All right. Now, the fourth thing that must be done is within the immigration department, there are various divisional heads or department heads. For example, KLIA 1, they will have a head of the immigration unit there. Then KLIA 2 may have one. Maybe in Port Klang, there is another one. Maybe in Penang Port, they may have one, or other airports and so on. So at all these points, there must be accountability from the head of department. Now that all these SOPs are being put in, the 7 or 8 corrective actions done based on MACC recommendation, the immigration department heads must be made accountable. So if there is any slip up, or if they deliberately didn't comply with, then failure to execute their fiduciary duties, then action must be taken, including terminating the immigration officers. And I think this is one of the problems throughout the civil service, where there is a carrot, but there is no stick. In other words, when people make deliberate mistakes or ignorance or fail in their fiduciary duties, action are not taken. So that is why the culture of integrity or culture of accountability is practically absent in the civil service. This is the root cause of the problem. We are not only talking about immigration department, we are also talking generally in all other departments. So the culture of accountability must be there. And this is very important for immigration department to correct its image.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mohan. Maybe we can spill over into the counter setting scandal that has been reported. I mean, the situation in KLIA, we know that the reports have, this is not like anything new. We've heard about this before. However, you know, the amount of leakages, we do not know to what extent, you know, with this sort of setting, and we don't know when it was set up. But do you think that policy reforms is enough without having the right, I suppose, people to push for the accountability then?
Okay, as we discussed just now, there were, I think, about 7 recommendations made by MACC, which is actually gaps, which are weaknesses. So I think that is the first step. It has to be corrected and put in place. Okay, then of course, when you put that in place, there must be amendments to the standard operating procedures. These are new controls being put in. You know, for example, the Chief Commissioner of MACC has said that, you know, when officers who are manning the counters, they should not have their mobile phones, for example. So that's just one measure, you know, one recommendations. But there could be other things that has to be put in place. For example, I would say that where officers who are manning the counters, maybe you have to install CCTV cameras at that position with the recordings so that we know. In other words, there will be clear visual and audio recording is done remotely. And these can deter agents or officers from bringing in undocumented persons or illegal entry or persons and things like that. So those are things that need to be done first, you know, to fix the controls in this place. Now, the other thing is one more recommendation, which I think the government should consider, is to slowly widen the digitalization process where there is zero human contact. In other words, before any foreigner, whether he's a student or whether he's a foreign worker, expatriates coming into the country, they have to pre-submit all their particulars online. And at every entry points, either they can only pass through the auto gate system, meaning which if their documents are incomplete or something like that, then they will be rejected, and then immediately action will be taken by the officers to intervene. And of course, this also must have proper procedures and so on. So we are here talking so far all about tightening the controls and so on. Now, of course, to do all this, leadership is very important. Now, we all know that we have a new DG, Dato Zakaria Shaban, who has been appointed as a new DG. Now, I would say this is very timely, and I think he, being someone from outside the immigration, he should tackle these problems head on, and he should do sweeping changes at this time, you know, to make sure all these new procedures are put in place. MACC is one of them, you know, giving inputs and so on. If need be, the DG can even get support from the government talk to the Minister of Finance and or his own minister, Home Affairs Minister, to get additional financial support to even hire experts. There are experts, international experts, and to do a thorough study of why these leakages are happening in all our entry points. This is a national security issue, and this is something we cannot take it lightly. So it's worth the money spent to do a thorough audit. Maybe because MACC has identified 7, maybe they may have missed some of them. So you may need some experts to actually do a thorough study, and what other gaps are there, fix those gaps. All right. So this requires strong leadership from the new DG, and I hope he will be brave enough and daring enough to make sweeping changes. Now, he is bound to face resistance from internal people, that's for sure, especially hearing all the stories in the immigration department. You have a ringleader who can actually control 40 over officers under his hand, and to collect bribes and so on. So you can imagine how systemic corruption and bribery is occurring in the department, and it's not going to be easy for this new DG to fix it. But I can be sure that the Prime Minister will back him up, the Home Minister will back him up, but he must be brave enough to make the sweeping changes. If there are officers who are resisting to make this any changes that he wants to do, there will be resistance. He must be bold enough to remove them, transfer them to some other department, and put in new people so that we can once and for all clean up the immigration department. This has gone too long.
All right. So, but doctor, as you know, some of the syndicates, or at least the KLIA syndicate situation here, it comprises both, not just internal immigration personnel, but also external sort of agents here, right? And as you mentioned, the DG, or at least the immigration department, needs to work with multi-agencies to eventually address this. But what more do you think needs to be done to curb the external influences here? Because we don't know to what extent the syndicate has reach into the levels of our governance, in a sense, administrations, right?
Yes. You see, when we say agents here, they are definitely not within the immigration department. Okay. So there are people outside. Now, these agents could be Malaysian agents, foreign workers agents, or something like that, or you could be connected to another country as well. But generally speaking, I would say that majority of the agents are Malaysians. They are the people liaising with the foreign agents, especially when you're talking about bringing foreign workers from either Nepal, or whether bringing people from Indonesia, or whether bringing people from Myanmar. They all have agents in every country, and our agency are working with them. So to facilitate entry for these people, definitely our immigration officers are working together with these agents. So definitely that is the reason why when I said that minimize the human intervention, okay, so that will actually mitigate the situation. But otherwise, we have to be on the constant lookout. And what MACC is doing wherever possible, whenever there is evidence and so on, they can actually arrest people and so on. But of course, beyond that, there's a lot more need to be done to clean up the department, especially in terms of culture, in terms of mindset, and so on. So these are some of the sweeping changes that the new DG has to do.
Okay, one last question here, because I think we covered enough. But in terms of, immigration officers not necessarily earning much, and then the fact that they were reportedly paid up to more than 3,000 ringgit to facilitate illegal entry, do you think a higher pay or better working conditions for our immigration staff would be able to, prevent corruption from happening?
The answer is no. No matter how much money you give them, corruption and bribery is a behavioral issue. You can pay him 10,000 ringgit salary a month, and yet he will still involve in these corrupt practices. As you have quoted just now, 3,500 per entry. So can you imagine in a day how many people are coming in and out and so on? So the money and it is being shared. When you have 40 over people working for one kingpin, one big senior officer, can you imagine? That is only one case. We do not know what's happening in the Bukit Kayu Hitam. We do not know what's happening in Johor Bahru. We do not know what's happening in Port Klang and so on. So this is not going to help. I think fundamental thing that the immigration department has to do, apart from tightening all these controls, that is the first thing you have to do. I think there has to be a cultural change within the civil service itself. Now, let's just take immigration department for simplistic reasons. The entire cultural change must happen in the organization, and this is not going to be easy to really explain to people why they should not do this and things like that. So that is one thing, that a lot of training, a lot of guidance, especially for newcomers and so on. Then you have the old batch of people. Now, this is also another challenge. Another thing that the government should quickly do, which we have recommended many times, is to amend the current Whistleblower Protection Act. We have a Whistleblower Protection Act 2010, but the act is full of flaws, especially under Section 6, whereby it says that protection can be given, but if you violate other laws, then such protection will be withdrawn. Now, for the civil servants, they all come under the Official Secrets Act. The moment they report something or wrongdoing in the department, sometimes they run a risk of being charged under OSA because they are leaking government secrets. So they may be afraid to come forward and report. So that is why the amendments to this Section 6 in the WPA has been recommended, and it's still not being tabled. So this is one thing the government need to do. Now, another point that before I end is to leverage on the use of religion. Now, for example, we as civil society, Transparency International Malaysia, we have published a book called The Sin of Corruption, A Religious Perspective. Inside this book, there are 6 chapters, and they cover 6 different religions, starting from Islam, Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Sikhism, Taoism, 6 religions. So one of the things that we would recommend is within the civil service and all the departments, they should use religion one of the way as part of the education and training program to explain to employees that, while all these SOPs are there, you yourself have to understand that when you commit any form of corruption, you will be answerable one day when the day of judgment. So these are things that I think in our country, this is not widely done. And now we have a book ready, and I think the government should leverage on this and educate the civil servants from a religious perspective, why it is a sin to be corrupt. And I think these are the few things that need to be done, because I can tell you, giving them higher pay and all that will not change their behavior. They will still continue to have to be involved in corruption simply because of greed. So I don't think salary increase will make any difference. So the other things we have to do, we have the cultural change, educate them from a religious perspective, and I think that in the long run that is going to make the difference.
Sorry, one last question, because just want to follow up on this. So how can the public better participate in, reporting sort of like the corruption that they see? Maybe Malaysia is able to spread some sort of like message across?
Well, the message that we want to give to the public is very simple. As Malaysians, I think we have a very big duty. And before I say what is the advice I want to give, I just want to quickly bring to you a survey we did about 3-4 years ago. 52% of Malaysians feel that it is not okay to report corruption. In other words, more than half of Malaysians surveyed feel that reporting corruption is not important. Now, this is a problem.
So?
Yes. Why they are doing this is simply because they have this mindset that corruption is the government's problem, the leader's problem, MACC's problem. They never ask a question, what can I do to make the difference? So this is the problem, because in Malay, there is a proverb saying that, jangan jaga tepi kain orang. Don't be a busybody, don't put your nose in other people's affairs and things like that. So this attitude of Malaysians, we have to change. When we see things are wrong, not necessarily corruption or bribery, when we see someone vandalizing public property, I know people are afraid, but there is other channels to report. You can take a photo, you can report to the authorities, that kind of thing. The civic consciousness is generally lacking among Malaysians. We are more interested about ourselves, how much I can benefit from this, and we are not worried about other things. Yes. Go on.
But do you think the platforms, or at least the avenues, are not necessarily enough for people to exercise their civic conscience? Or is it actually enough, but we just don't care about it?
I think there are two, in fact, both reasons. One is the current platforms that are available are very limited. Let's say corruption, people only tend to think of uniform bodies. So like in this case, MACC, or other wrongdoings, the police. Now also I must say, to be in all fairness, not every Malaysian have full trust in some of the uniform bodies. There is a trust deficit, whether it is the police or whether it is MACC, because of some of the shortcomings within the uniform bodies themselves. So public trust is not very high. So people don't want to report. People say that, or what make difference it make if I report? They are also the same. So that is the reason why the government is thinking of setting up an ombudsman's office, which I hope will happen in 1 or 2 years' time. So this ombudsman office is a neutral body whereby public can channel all their complaints, and accordingly, the ombudsman office will channel the complaints to the respective agencies. That's what is being planned. That's one way. Okay. The other thing is, we ourselves, Malaysians, as we go along, I think we have, as I said just now, we have an attitude problem. We have to change. If you love your country, you have to speak up. If you care for your country, you will speak up. So that, I think, is generally lacking among Malaysians, because we are very fast to blame MACC, very fast to blame the police, very fast to blame the leadership of the country, but we never ask a question, what can I do to make a difference for my country? So I think it's two things as well. One is the platforms has to be improved for people to report, make it easier for them, let them have greater trust. But the other thing is Malaysians themselves, we have to change our attitude.
Understood. Basically asking ourselves, what are we doing to play a part in combating corruption here? All right, thank you so much, Dr. Mohan, for joining me. I do appreciate your insights. Maybe for future reference, maybe we can get in touch for the ombudsman sort of like happening. Do you think 2 years is a bit too long, or should we expedite
Definitely
it faster?
it's too long. The reason why I say 2 years, judging from my experience with dealing with the government legislative changes. And for your information, I spoke just now about amendments to the Whistleblower Protection Act. Amendments, we already have a law, but I'm talking about amendment, the thing that need to be changed. You know how long it has taken? 5 years now. Since 2019 we started. Until today, this has not been done. So can you imagine you want to formulate a new law? Because we don't have an Ombudsman Act in Malaysia. We're going to have a new act. So can you imagine how long it can take? So I'll be very happy if it can be done during the period of Madani government, that the Ombudsman Act is actually being passed and become an act passed by Parliament within the 2 years before their term finishes. If that can be done, it's a big achievement for the Madani government.
Let's hope for bigger and better sort of updates on this, basically. All right,
Sure.
Thank you again, Dr.
Thank
Mohan.
you.
I appreciate your time.
Right, there you go. You've heard it from Dr. Mohan himself, and as he correctly mentioned, this sort of clean house approach needs to be across all levels, across the board for all the public sector service, right? Because we want to see a very effective governance, and we hope to see it within the Madani government, not when the next administration comes in.
That's true.
Now, before we end the show, I just want to check in with you, Hazween. Did you heard about an American YouTuber known as IShowSpeed coming to Malaysia for his like 24 hours pit stop of sorts, right?
I have heard, actually, but to be completely honest with you, I haven't heard of him up until maybe some months ago, and I've probably maybe caught one video of his. Yes, the YouTuber you are alluding to, IShowSpeed, he has he's got a really huge platform with over 30 million subscribers on YouTube. His real name, though, is Darren Watkins Jr., and his recent visit to Malaysia a couple of days ago saw throngs of fans basically just swarming him, and it got pretty overwhelming from what I heard.
It was a pandemonium, or at least the fan made it such a way, because you know what, like he went to Pavilion and apparently the escalator broke down.
Really?
The fan actually broke down the escalator, and they went to another, like I suppose, famous place, which was opened by Uncle Rogers. Uncle Rogers
Uncle
had
Roger,
to
yeah.
Uncle Roger, the nasi goreng
Yeah.
joint, the T20
Yeah.
nasi goreng joint in Pavilion. So that shop had to be closed down. The shutters were all down because fans were just going crazy with
Right.
IShowSpeed. I'm not too sure
And
why.
it wasn't just the escalator that broke. His camera broke too, just because there was just too many people going after him, and he was just essentially mobbed by so many fans. All at
You
the
know
same
what's
time,
funny? The fact that he made more news than Bruno Mars, because Bruno Mars
Yeah,
came
that is
over
true.
during the same day. If I'm not
I found out.
mistaken, same
I found
time.
out about IShowSpeed first, rather than Bruno Mars. In fact, Bruno Mars visited earlier, didn't he? He came
Yeah, he-
before
yeah.
IShowSpeed. Yeah, so I found out about IShowSpeed sooner than Bruno Mars.
Right. So I
That
suppose
shows you.
YouTubers now they have all the attention on them, right? They
Yes.
are making a big buck,
True.
I suppose.
I mean, he's a big deal, and such is the kind of scale of his influence.
Right. No, I saw a clip because it was all over my socials the past few days. Apparently, he was taught to this word, which is sabar. He had to like say that to a lot of Malaysians who he had to encounter. And he was also saying that, Malaysians, this is not the way to show love, because he was honestly felt like vulnerable, I suppose, because as you mentioned, they broke his camera. Isn't that just embarrassing? I'm not too sure. Like, we're supposed to like treat our guests well.
That is right. I mean, I think the other thing was that it wasn't just the masses of people, the volume of people that got to him, but I think another thing that really got to him was our weather here. He did say somewhere in an interview I managed to catch that he found it very humid, and I think that sort of played into the whole overwhelming experience for him.
Right.
And on top of that, it certainly didn't help that his camera got broken, and even the escalator broke. I mean, that's pretty funny, actually, if you ask me.
I mean, IShowSpeed, I suppose if you're watching this, Malaysia is not for the faint-hearted. But if you do come again, maybe come with lesser entourage, maybe come as like, I don't know, yourself,
Or
Darren.
perhaps maybe make your visit unannounced,
Right,
so that
true.
not so many people are aware, and you just pop up, and then who happens to be there will be there.
Someone was telling him to go to Langkawi,
Okay.
and then have like a more relaxed sort of, I suppose,
But he's probably on
environment.
his way home now, isn't he?
Yeah, and if he had like more than 24 hours, we probably still do invite him on the show. But I don't know how that's going to take.
That actually would be
Transpire.
a good thing for the show. Definitely, we'll
Yeah.
definitely have get younger viewers to watch this show.
Now, apparently, his live stream went all over, not just within Malaysia, but also within the region. And during his visit, a fan gave him a batik shirt, which, prompted him to kind of do a search of where batik came from, right? And that caused another debate on the online sphere. Like, so you've got Malaysians, being annoyed because Indonesian then said, even Darren or IShowSpeed claiming that,
Right.
the origins of batik came
Hashtag
from.
done claim.
Hashtag done claim came
Yeah.
from Indonesia. Oh gosh.
Every so often it happens. It will come up. Every so often. Yeah.
But fun fact that for those of you who don't know, batik is a form of art, right? It's how you design the fabric. And to be fair, in countries such as Africa or continents such as Africa, they do have their own batik. So it's not necessarily just within our region. It's just
Although
motifs are different.
I'm very sure that the kind of batik that he showed that he was that he had seen is obviously Malaysian.
That was
So
Malaysian.
the done claim
yeah.
part maybe
Over exaggerated because he was searching.
It's
the-
always the usual
Yeah.
suspects: Singapore, Indonesia.
yeah. Oh well.
Anyway,
Anyway,
I don't want to start any feud, any new wars now. We'll just stop it there.
kita kan serumpun. So anyway, unfortunately, this is the end of the episode. If you like this episode, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to also turn on the notification bell if you haven't already. You'll not only get Beyond the Headlines update, you'll get everything and anything from NSC Online. Definitely on YouTube. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, X, as well as Instagram. My name is Amalina Kamal,
And I'm Hazween Hassan.
and we'll see you next week.